To enjoy this episode of Forensic Tales ad-free, check us out on Patreon. Patreon.com/Forensic Tales.
Forensic Tales discusses topics that some listeners may find disturbing. The contents of this episode may not be suitable for everyone. Listener discretion is advised.
On July 18th, 2014, Florida state law professor Dan Markel was gunned down in his Tallahassee driveway. His murder shocked the academic world, ignited a nearly decade-long investigation, and ultimately exposed what prosecutors say was a murder-for-hire plot. Over the years, 3 people have already been convicted. But for more than a decade, attention has remained fixed on one person at the center of it all, Donna Adelson, the matriarch, the grandmother, and prosecutors say the mastermind. In August 2025, after years of speculation and mounting evidence, Donna Adelson finally stood trial. This episode of Forensic Tales is a special breakdown of the forensic evidence presented against her. And now, after all of this time, a jury has spoken. On September 4th, 2025, Donna Adelson was found guilty of all charges. This decision marked a stunning victory for prosecutors who had long pursued her. This is Forensic Tales, episode number 298, the trial recap of Donna Adelson. On the morning of July 18th, 2014, Florida state law professor Dan Markel pulled into his driveway after dropping his children off at a daycare and stopping at the gym. As he sat in his car, he was ambushed, shot twice at close range, and he died the following day. Within days, the police realized this was no random killing. Dan Markel had been targeted that day. The murder itself was shocking. Dan was just 41 years old, a respected scholar, and a father to 2 young boys. But it wasn't just his professional life that stood out. It was his personal life. At the time of his murder, he was involved in a very contentious divorce and custody battle with his ex-wife, Wendy Adelson. And a judge had recently denied Wendy's request to relocate with their 2 boys to South Florida to be closer to her family. The ruling meant she was tied to Tallahassee and she was tied to Dan. For months, the case went unsolved, but then the police released a video. It was a security footage of a silver Toyota Prius they suspected was involved in the shooting. That eventually led to 2 Miami men, Sigfredo Garcia and Luis Rivera. They had driven that Prius nearly 500 miles to carry out the hit. In 2016, Rivera struck a plea deal and admitted what many of us had already suspected. It was a murder-for-hire plot. He named Garcia as the shooter and described a woman, Catherine Magbanua, as the go-between connecting them to the Adelson family. According to prosecutors, the arrangement was simple. Charlie Adelson, Wendy's brother, funneled money through Katie to pay for the murder. The motive? To free his sister and their mother Donna from Dan's restrictions, allowing Wendy to move to Miami with the 2 kids. Over the next several years, convictions began stacking up one by one. Garcia was sentenced to life in prison in 2019. Katie Magbanua was found guilty at a retrial in 2022. She was sentenced to life plus 60 years. And in 2023, Charlie Adelson was convicted on all counts and given a life sentence. That left one final piece: the alleged mastermind. In November 2023, Authorities arrested Donna Adelson at Miami International Airport as she was about to board a one-way flight to Vietnam, a country with no extradition treaty with the United States. Subsequent to that, she was charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy, and solicitation. After years of speculation, whispers, Donna would finally stand trial, facing the possibility that a jury could convict her for orchestrating the murder of her former son-in-law. And at trial, prosecutors leaned on a powerful set of forensic tools, not to prove that Donna pulled the trigger herself, but to argue she engineered the plan behind the scenes. Forensic evidence number 1, wiretaps and phone records. When prosecutors say Donna Adelson didn't need to pull a trigger to be found guilty, this is the backbone of that argument. What was said on the phone, when it was said, and who was on the other end. First, the phone pattern story that predates the wiretaps. Investigators mapped a cascade of calls in the spring and summer of 2014, right around the time that the hitman traveled north. As jurors heard, when Katie Magbanawa rented a car in June 2014, she phoned Charlie Adelson, and within about a minute, Charlie called the Adelson residence landline, a number he rarely used. Prosecutors say that landline connected directly to Donna. The same call pattern repeats in July when a Toyota Prius is rented for the second trip. Katie reaches Charlie, Charlie reaches the Adelson home. Then on the night before the murder, records show a flurry of calls between midnight and 1 a.m. among Charlie Adelson, Donna Adelson, Katie Magbanawa, and Sigfredo Garcia, the shooter who was later convicted. It's one of the earliest breadcrumbs tying Donna into the communications web, long before the FBI microphones ever came on. And then came what investigators call the turning point, the bump. 2 years after the murder in 2016, the FBI staged an undercover operation. An agent approached Donna in a Miami parking lot and handed her a flyer with a phone number, an implied blackmail note meant to trigger a reaction. The message was clear. We know what you did, and we want money to keep it quiet. What Donna did next became a very important piece of evidence. Instead of calling police, like maybe you or I would do, instead of brushing it off, her very first phone call was to Charlie. And in that call, prosecutors say she revealed everything. The two spoke in careful, coded terms. In one exchange played for the jury, Charlie asks, "Does it involve me or other people?" Donna calmly replies, "Probably the both of us. So you probably have a general idea of what I'm talking about." From there, jurors heard hours of recorded phone calls, wiretaps placed on Charlie's line, capturing his conversations with his mother in the days after the bump. Prosecutors wanted the jury to hear how Donna and Charlie stayed in lockstep, speaking in the same language, referring to birthday presents, and other phrases that they argued were code for arranging the murder. They also asked the jury to track Donna's text messages to Charlie back in March of 2014, months before the shooting, where she wrote things like, "I know you'll come through," in reference to securing a, quote, birthday present for her husband, Harvey. The state's theory was that the birthday present was code for the plot. These messages line up with the hitman's travel windows and the car rentals, and prosecutors argued that Charlie's quick follow-up calls to the Adelson home were part of a relay, Katie to Charlie to Donna. The state's forensic phone mapping, tower pings, toll records, timestamps don't prove what words were said back in 2014, but it anchors the relationships and the timing. who contacted whom around rental pickups, highway drives, Tallahassee sightings of that Prius, and critically, the hours before and after the shooting. But the defense pushed back, and they pushed back hard, saying there was no direct call where Donna ever ordered a murder. They even called a digital forensic expert from Spokane, Washington, to challenge the state's portrayal of the call communications. That expert testified that the number of communications the prosecution presented between Donna and Charlie Adelson was slightly inflated. She counted 69 interactions instead of the reported 80. She also added that the state's evidence couldn't prove Donna went to Charlie's house on the night of the murder. That essentially undermined the prosecution's assumption of her active involvement that night. On top of that, they cross-examined many of the other state witnesses on how much was interpretation versus fact, arguing prosecutors were reading criminal meaning into family logistics and family language. But the prosecution kept returning to the same point. It's not about a single phone call. It's about the pattern. Who calls whom, when, and what gets set into motion after that phone call. Just because Donna never directly spoke with Katie or either of the hitmen doesn't mean she wasn't communicating with them through her son Charlie. Forensic evidence number 2, the finances. If the phone calls and wiretaps gave the jurors a sense of Donna Adelson's words, the financial records gave them a map of her actions. Prosecutors say the money trail reveals exactly how the murder for hire scheme was paid for, and ultimately, who benefited. Starting with the state's evidence. At trial, they argued that the Adelson family financed the killing of Dan Markel. They pointed to the $100,000 price tag on the hit, money that flowed in part through Katie McBanawa, who, as we know, was dating Charlie Adelson at the time. They showed that in the weeks and months after the murder, Katie, who had no steady employment history, suddenly began receiving large sums of money. Jurors heard about her new lifestyle, cash deposits, rent payments, and checks connected to the Adelson family's dental practice. They told the jury that these weren't just generous gifts, they were payoffs. Financial records also showed that Sigfredo Garcia, the shooter, made cash purchases and deposits shortly after the killing. Money, prosecutors say, came straight from Katie, who acted as the middlewoman. So the theory was clear. Donna and her son Charlie funneled money through Katie to pay for the hitmen. They said the spending patterns lined up perfectly with the murder timeline. And beyond the payoffs, prosecutors said Donna herself reaped the ultimate financial benefit. Her daughter, Wendy, finally freed from custody restrictions, could move the children down to South Florida, closer to the rest of the family. It was all a win-win. Now, the defense's response. They tried to dismantle this money trail piece by piece. They argued that there were no bank records, no check, no direct transfer that ever tied Donna personally to the hitman. Every payment prosecutors pointed to, they said, could be explained as an ordinary form of support, money that Charlie provided to his girlfriend Katie while they were in a relationship together. They also pointed out how Katie was on the Adelsons' payroll at the dental office, which could explain the checks that she got. And while her lifestyle may have improved, they argued that it was because of her relationship with Charlie, not because she was laundering money from Donna. So their bottom line was also simple. The state had plenty of suspicion, but no receipt that directly said murder for hire. They almost tried to downplay Donna's role at the dental office, suggesting that she was just writing the checks at her son Charlie's direction and never asked or had any questions about where exactly the money was going to. Ignorance is bliss, right? Forensic evidence number 3, digital forensics. In a murder for hire conspiracy, it's usually not the weapon that gives the story away. It's the digital breadcrumbs. And for Donna, there were 2 very strong pieces of evidence against her. Her personal planner and phone/GPS mapping tied to her communications and movements. Number 1, the planner entry. In Donna's planner from 2014, she had written out Dan Markel's car model and license plate number, a detail only someone closely tracking him would know. So the prosecution argued that Donna having this information years after Dan and Wendy's divorce was evidence she was a central figure in the murder plot. They say this information about Dan Markel's car was ultimately turned over to the 2 men who actually shot and killed him. Number 2, the call logs and GPS. On the night of the murder, phone data suggested Donna and her husband Harvey's cell phones had left South Florida and pinged near Charlie Adelson's home, suggesting they were in the area. Donna had even sent Charlie a text saying, "outside of your house." What was the prosecution's theory about why Donna had stopped at Charlie's house? Well, to deliver the cash in order to get to the hitmen after the murder. So combined, the planner entry with Dan's license plate information and mobile data created a digital trail placing Donna not just conceptually connected to Dan Markel, but physically near the scene at a very pivotal moment. But the defense pushed back on both points. When it came to the planner note, they said that writing down someone's license plate number isn't a crime. It could have been motherly vigilance. The former mother-in-law wanted to have her son-in-law's car information just in case of an emergency. Maybe it was some type of suspicious habit or simply casual note-taking. They tried to say that the note was completely unremarkable and showed absolutely zero link between Donna and the crime. There could be 1,000,001 reasons why she would have had his license plate number written down in her planner, according to the defense. On the GPS and phone data, they reminded jurors, phone pings and location records are inferences, not actual proof of either intent or action. They can also be inaccurate depending on which cell phone tower they hit. And just because a phone shows up near a home doesn't mean that person was there or engaged in any type of criminal activity. It could be passing by, being dropped off, or something else entirely. So in the end, they framed the digital evidence as circumstantial at best, useful for building a timeline, but not conclusive proof of wrongdoing or motive on Donna's behalf when it came to the crime. With the digital breadcrumbs mapped and interpreted, we now turn to arguably the most dramatic forensic weapon in the prosecution's case: testimony from jailhouse informants, offering a glimpse into what Donna Adelson is alleged to have said behind bars. This episode of Forensic Tales is brought to you by Lola Blankets. I'll admit it, I'm a total blanket person. After my toddler is in bed, my wind-down routine always looks the same. A true crime doc on, tea in hand, and me wrapped in my Lola blanket. I have the large in cosmic gray, and from the second I opened it, I was obsessed. It's ultra soft, luxurious, and instantly made my space feel cozy. Honestly, I don't even touch my old blankets anymore. Lola is the world's #1 blanket for a reason. Crafted with luxury vegan faux fur and their signature 4-way stretch, it's machine washable, durable, and somehow just gets better after every wash. For a limited time, my listeners are getting a huge 35% off their entire order at lolablankets.com by using code TAILS at checkout. Just head to lolablankets.com and use code TAILS for 35% off. After your purchase, they will ask you where you heard about them. Please support my show and tell them that I sent you. Wrap yourself in luxury with Lola Blankets. Forensic evidence number 4, jailhouse informants. Sometimes the most damaging evidence in a high-profile trial doesn't come from a lab. It comes from the people sitting in the cell next to the accused. And in Donna's case, prosecutors relied heavily on the words of jailhouse informants. Here's what the state presented. Jurors heard from 2 inmates who testified that Donna told them she was involved in Dan Markel's murder. One woman described how Donna allegedly tried to script her testimony, encouraging her to memorize a story that would make Donna look less involved. They argued this showed her awareness of the charges and her willingness to manipulate others in order to protect herself. After that, another informant recounted conversations where Donna supposedly referred to Dan Markel's murder as a family problem that spiraled out of control. According to this witness, Donna indicated she knew more than what she was letting on publicly, and that she feared her son Charlie had already spilled too much during his own trial. So the state basically said, if Donna was innocent, why would she be trying to coach witnesses from behind bars or casually admit knowledge of the murder plot? They wanted jurors to consider that even in a controlled environment like jail, Donna couldn't stop talking about the crime. On the other hand, the defense attacked the credibility of these 2 witnesses with everything they had. We all know that jailhouse informants can be some of the least reliable sources of testimony in our entire criminal justice system. They even said these 2 women had very strong reasons to lie in front of the jury. They wanted reduced sentences or better living conditions while incarcerated in exchange for their testimony. These women produced fabrications to get what they wanted. It wasn't the truth. They also highlighted inconsistencies in their accounts, pointing out that neither of them could provide details that weren't already widely reported in the media. If Donna had really confessed, the defense argued, where were the specifics? Where was the information that only she would know? In the end, the defense told jurors to treat this testimony with extreme skepticism. Jailhouse informants, they said, are opportunistic. And in a high-profile case such as this, there's a lot of incentive to come forward with a dramatic story, whether or not it's true. Forensic evidence number 5, behavioral and circumstantial evidence. When prosecutors call Donna Adelson the matriarch mastermind, they're not just pointing to phone logs or bank records. They're pointing to her behavior, the way she acted once the walls started closing in. And in the most striking example, her attempted flight to Vietnam. In November 2023, just days after her son Charlie was convicted of murder, she arrived at the Miami International Airport with a one-way plane ticket to Vietnam. Why Vietnam, you might ask? Well, in case you aren't aware, Vietnam is a country with no extradition treaty with the United States. So for prosecutors, this wasn't a coincidence, and it wasn't a vacation. This was a desperate escape plan. Donna knew that once her son had been convicted, they would be coming after her next. But before she could do that, or before she could be arrested, she tried to get on a plane. And when she was taken into custody, she had everything with her: her passport, cash, all of her travel documents, including a visa. To the state, this was as close to a confession as you can get without the actual words. Why would an innocent grandmother, potentially facing serious charges, try to flee halfway across the world to a country that couldn't send her back? They framed this as consciousness of guilt, a legal concept that jurors are often instructed on. They told the jury, innocent people don't run, guilty people do. And Donna, she ran. The state also reminded jurors about Donna's own words in conversations with friends and family, which they said showed her hatred for Dan Markel. Wendy, her daughter, once referred to him as an emotional terrorist and even an STD. And Donna echoed those sentiments, portraying Dan as a problem that needed to be solved. Now, the defense. They tried to soften the image of Donna as this international fugitive. They argued by November 2023, Donna was terrified. Her son had just been convicted and sentenced to life in prison. The media was circling her family like vultures. She was 75 years old, in failing health and emotionally unraveling. They said that her trip to Vietnam wasn't about running from guilt. It was about getting away from chaos. They said she had visited Vietnam before, describing it as a place that she loved, and it was a place that her and Harvey had already been planning to travel to. They pushed back on the whole no extradition part, reminding jurors that most citizens don't sit around Googling extradition treaties. To the defense, the idea that Donna Adelson carefully planned an escape route to a country without extradition was far-fetched. They framed it as panic, not plotting. And they returned to the broader theme. Circumstantial evidence is not proof. The airport arrest may have looked bad, but looking guilty is not the same as being guilty. Maybe Donna felt depressed or even suicidal after Charlie's conviction, and she wanted to get away for a while to just clear her head. After all of that, the phone records, the planner, the informants, even the dramatic airport arrest, you might expect Donna Adelson to take the stand and try to explain herself. I think the jurors waited for it. Observers in the courtroom waited for it. I waited for it, but it never happened. On September 3rd, after days of trial drama, the defense made a bold move. Donna stood before Judge Everett and said, "At this time, I don't want to testify." The judge cautioned her, saying that even though the jury couldn't hold that against her, everyone knew just how much that moment meant. Jurors watched as she opted out of taking the stand, a decision many viewed as risky in such a high-profile case. Even more unexpected than Donna not taking the stand, no Charlie. Charlie Adelson, the convicted co-conspirator, was never called to testify. The defense didn't call him, and the state didn't call him. Despite widespread anticipation that he might appear in order to support his mother, he never did. Prosecutors had already rested their case, and Charlie wasn't a part of the defense's strategy. So would he have, quote, fallen on the sword for his mother? Or would he have thrown her under the bus? I guess we'll never know. But even without Donna or Charlie's testimonies, there were still many bombshell moments throughout the trial. The first was Wendy Adelson herself, who was subpoenaed to take the stand for the prosecution. She, of course, is Donna's daughter and Dan Markel's ex-wife, who some people suspect might be prosecuted next. On the stand, she admitted to referring to Dan Markel as an emotional terrorist, a dark lord, and even described him as being an STD. Now, I think it's fair to say that Dan and Wendy didn't like each other at the time of the murder. Wendy insisted she had nothing to do with what happened to him, but she wasn't the one on trial. It was her mom. She said her mom was involved in almost every aspect of her life, from who she dated before Dan to how to raise her two boys years later. Donna was involved in every aspect of her only daughter's life, including her separation and divorce from Dan Markel. Her testimony cut to the heart of the Adelson family dynamics, frustration, resentment, but she claimed no conspiracy. Some people may have thought she was going to try to throw her mom under the bus, but she didn't. She claimed to have no knowledge about what happened and wasn't aware that her mom did either. So even though she was there as a prosecution witness, Wendy Adelson didn't seem to really help either side, except to show that Donna was in fact very involved in her children's lives. So if she was super involved, did she have motive to want Dan dead in order to spend more time with Wendy and more time with her grandchildren? Was Donna angry about the fact that Dan didn't like her spending time with the boys because he thought she was saying mean things about him? Then there was Robert Adelson's testimony, the other Adelson boy. His testimony was, in my opinion, even worse for Donna. He's an accomplished physician living in New York who hasn't been close with the rest of his family for years. He's been estranged from them. But in August 2025, he heard the subpoena and returned to Tallahassee to testify. This was his first time appearing anywhere in the proceedings. During his testimony, Robert delivered lines that felt more ordinary, but carried so much weight for the prosecution. When asked how Donna felt about Dan Markel when Dan and Wendy were first dating, Robert said she had a very positive view of him until the relationship ended. As the custody fight got worse, he began to see a change. He also said that after the murder, none of the family, including Donna, expressed curiosity about who killed Dan Markel. He said it simply wasn't a topic of conversation in the family home, even amid all of the national attention on the case. It was not a subject for discussion, he told the court. It would be rerouted. It was just not a subject to discuss. If you were sitting on the jury, you had to ask yourself, why wouldn't Donna be curious about who gunned down her former son-in-law? Why wouldn't this murder be the ultimate topic of conversation for this family? In the end, Robert was a pretty powerful witness for the prosecution. He said how controlling his mom was. She was the family's shot caller. Donna was the one running the show. Finally, closing arguments. Prosecutors stood before the jury and painted Donna as the mastermind. They reminded jurors that 3 people were already behind bars for Dan Markel's death, 2 hitmen and Donna's son Charlie, and that the murder was not a crime of passion, but a family business arrangement. They pointed to the wiretaps where Donna spoke in coded language, the license plate number written in her planner, the phone call flurries before and after the shooting, and the airport arrest in Miami as she tried to board a one-way flight to Vietnam. Their theory was simple. Donna didn't need to pull the trigger. She just needed to make sure that her son-in-law was gone so that her daughter could finally move to South Florida. She didn't hold the gun, but make no mistake, she loaded it. Without Donna Adelson, there is no plot, there is no money, and there is no murder. The defense, in contrast, asked the jury to focus on what was missing. No fingerprints, no DNA, no direct order from Donna captured on tape. They argued that the state had spent years weaving a web of suspicion, but suspicion wasn't proof beyond a reasonable doubt. They hammered home that every piece of evidence was circumstantial. The planner entry could have just been innocent note-taking. The phone calls could have been about family matters. The payments to Katie could have been explained as payroll from the dental practice, or gifts from Charlie, who she'd been dating. And about Vietnam, the defense called it panic, not plotting. A frightened 75-year-old grandma running away from the devastation about what had happened to Charlie and what was happening to her family. That wasn't a sign of guilt. Their bottom line was blunt. The state wants you to fill in the blanks, but your duty is to not speculate. Your duty is to convict only if you're certain. And here, there is no certainty. And then the jury finally had their say. On September 4th, after only about 3 hours of deliberation, the jury returned its decision. Donna Adelson was found guilty of everything she was accused of: first-degree murder, conspiracy, and solicitation. The verdict marked a stunning victory for prosecutors who had long argued Donna was the mastermind. Will there be additional charges against others who some suspect may have been involved in Dan Markel's execution? Only time will tell. This has been a special trial coverage episode of Forensic Tales. Thank you for joining me as we walked through the evidence against Donna Adelson and the verdict that closes this chapter of the Dan Markel case. If you want more stories like this, consider joining me on Patreon, where you can unlock bonus content, early ad-free episodes, and more. Don't forget to subscribe to Forensic Tales on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. And please leave a rating and review. It really helps other listeners discover the show. Until then, stay safe. And remember, not all stories have happy endings. Forensic Tales is a Rockefeller audio production. The show is written and produced by me, Courtney Fretwell. If you'd like to help create compelling new cases, fund research, and assist with production and editing costs, you can support the show with a small monthly contribution. In return, you'll be one of the first to listen to new ad-free episodes and gain access to exclusive content. To learn more, visit patreon.com/Forensic Tales. Forensic Tales is made possible by our Patreon producers: Tony A., Christine B., Sherry A., Michael D., Nicola, Megan G., Ureli, Jerry, Ann F., Carol A., Shannon D., Marianne C., Lois B., Lynn H., Ashley H., Danielle D., Chrissy D., Brett R., Luz Raquel, and Christine K. If you'd like to become a producer of the show, head over to our Patreon page or email me at Courtney@forensictales.com. Thank you for listening and see you next week. Until then, remember, not all stories have happy endings.